Man, I'm kind of bummed out. So, I'm aware of the acute irony when it comes to posting this video, probably right after I post the Daily Does the Stupid, where I made fun of somebody who was asking me to talk about this on a video that had absolutely nothing to do with Deepwoken, but the truth is that I've been getting requests to talk about the Ignition Union origin basically since its release. For the last few weeks, my DMs have been pretty regularly prompted by people saying, hey, this whole Ignition Union thing is really shitty, can you talk about it? And to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't want to believe those people. And I also wanted to believe that if I just left it alone for a while, eventually the problem would sort itself out. And unfortunately, about a month after the Ignition Union origin has come out, well, it just doesn't seem like anything's been done. And because of that, here I am again. And the thing that I think is probably the most sad about this entire situation, before I even talk about the more in-depth problems with the Ignition Union origin, and more importantly, the new Ignition Union dungeon, is the fact that people have been asking me to cover this for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks now, and I just feel uncomfortable giving more and more credit to the people who say that the Deepwoken developers don't listen to their community, and if public figureheads like me don't bring attention to issues, then they'll just remain issues forever. So this is more of an open letter to the Deepwoken developers, who I have a good feeling will see this video. Guys, if I knew that this was a consistent problem for the last 2 or 3 weeks, how did you not? I'm not a Deepwoken community figurehead. I play the game every once in a while, every couple of months. I was active on the game for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. For a lot of you, this is your jobs, and yet player feedback is either being completely ignored or thrown to the wayside. I just find it impossible to believe that I know about this and you don't. I don't know, man. I'm really disappointed. After you get the Ignition Union origin, which is pretty self-explanatory, there's like 100 videos on YouTube on how to get it, you'll spawn in the basement of Miner's Landing right next to a big drill. Talk to the person next to the big drill, and that'll put you down into the mines. So to be perfectly upfront with you when it comes to my experience with the origin, I believe I made it to around power 8 on my first go-around, and that's the point where I just gave up, said, I'm bored to hell with this, and stopped playing. And that's not a very good sign. Basically, the way the new dungeon works is that you hop into this Ignition Union drill, you hit the lever, and when you do, it'll bring you down a floor. These floors consist of 4 pre-generated layouts. And of course, I do have to give credit where credit's due. As usual with Deepwoken, the general vibe of this entire dungeon area is really, really solid. They nailed the atmosphere here, but unfortunately, that's about all they nailed. The gameplay loop of each floor of the dungeon is always the same. You get to the floor, step out of the mining pod, do a circuit around the dungeon, killing all of the enemies, and after defeating all the enemies, you'll get a chunk of XP, 2 chests that spawn by the Ignition Union drill, and then you'll need to collect a bunch of these ores in order to get further down. Now, in terms of problems, I want to start very first with the map design and the map layout. Now, normally when you have high up areas where you can fall off a cliff into a big pit of lava, you would initially assume that if you fell into said pit of lava, you would instantly die. And the same thing would go for any enemies who fell into said pit of lava. Now, as you can probably guess by my tone of voice, that is not what happens. For whatever reason, these are not death pits. If you fall into here, you'll take periodic damage. Now, I think that the enemies don't take the periodic damage. This is huge issue number 1. And it's one of those things that there's no fucking way they didn't catch this. There's no way. If they did any testing whatsoever, they would have caught this. But there is no way that this was tested, because if it was, this wouldn't be able to happen. What am I talking about? Well, if an AI enemy falls off the cliff, it is just permanently stuck down there. Yeah, that's right, it has no way of getting back up. And not only that, because the lava seemingly doesn't kill it, if it falls down there, it can never get back up and it can never die. Now this becomes extra problematic with the Mudskipper Brutes, because for some ungodly reason, the Deepwoken developers decided that these guys, in particular, I have no idea why, can aggro you directly through walls. So if you've ever been in the depths and you've been confused as to why a Mudskipper Broodlord just flew out of nowhere, or decided that it wanted to jump straight through a wall with its dash attack, well, the reason it can do that is because this asshole can see you through walls, unlike, well, seemingly everything else. This is a problem because in the canyon specific area, if you walk out the pod and go to this little area, the Mudskipper Brute will immediately get mad at you and then walk off the cliff. Now you might be wondering, well, if it walks off the cliff, what's the big deal, right? Well, I'll tell you what the big deal is. If it walks off the cliff and it can't die, then you can't get the reward for the floor anymore. Like, what the fuck, guys? Seriously? There were several times while I was playing where an enemy would end up falling off the map in one way or another and just get stuck in the bottom. There was one instance, the one that caused me to just say, fuck it, I'm not playing anymore and quit out, when 2 Megalodons jumped off the cliff. But because I have no idea why, the Deepwoken developers decided that the Megalodon's ranged attack should be able to go clean through walls. I was trying to fight another one, and I kept getting shot through the wall by invincible enemies that I couldn't attack just significantly below me. Does this look fair to you? Does this look fun to you? The answer to both of those is no. Absolutely not. This is bullshit and not fun. And again, for the probably 50th time, I just cannot in good faith believe that the people who created this did any proper testing, because otherwise they would have caught it. This is not an easy thing for me to have found. I found it within playing for like an hour and a half. I didn't even play for that long. But whatever. Moving on with the environments, and we gotta talk about the invisible walls and the parkour. So invisible walls is one of those things that's hard to sort of sum up in clips, and so it's one of those things that you sort of have to play for yourself. But it feels like the invisible walls in the entirety of this dungeon are completely out of hand. Like, there are times where it is very, very abundantly clear that you are just standing on nothing, or you are climbing nothing. And I just have to wonder why. Like, was it that hard to make a rock protrude out of here instead of having an invisible slope? When I first got down here, considering that this is an origin, it's somewhere that you start, so I assumed that it would be perfectly doable with 0 agility. Well, the canyons area of the game is really, really difficult to navigate with 0 agility, because they seemingly had no forethought for people trying to traverse this with 0 agility. And so the way up is to jank around with the invisible walls. It just feels unfinished. This whole thing feels unfinished, not just the map. It's like they got halfway through and they were like, all right, good enough, push it out. And I mean, I just expect so much more from the people that, in my opinion, are behind one of, if not probably the best games on the entire platform. And on the final note, when it comes to the maps itself, we gotta talk about the hurt barriers and lava. Because, well, just look at it. Guys, I made fun of Blox Fruit for stuff like this. Blox Fruit. You're on the same level as Blox Fruit. And I mean that. This is Blox Fruit level bad. How does this happen? How do you stoop to Blox Fruit? Did you check to make sure it worked, or did you just put it in there and go, I hope it's fine? Oh, man. Right on. So the final real problematic mechanic when it comes to the Ignition Union dungeon, in my opinion, is the way that you have to power the drill back up in order to descend into the next floor. Now, there's a cynical part of me that makes me think that the reason that they didn't make the requirement to get to the next floor clearing the current floor is that maybe they knew that there was a good chance that things would bug out and that you wouldn't be able to kill all of the enemies in order to get to the next floor, and that's why they decided to go with this extra system. But regardless, the way that you power up the drill, you need to go up to these crystal ore nodes, break them with your pickaxe, pick them up, and then bring them back to the drill. Now, I am very, very thankful and lucky that I figured out towards the very, very end of my playthrough when it comes to this, that you could pick up multiple of these ores at the same time. Based on what people were telling me in DMs, I am not the only one stupid enough to have thought that you needed to bring these back one at a time. And so thankfully, it's not as bad as I initially thought it was for the majority of my time playing, which was that you had to mine these and bring them back one at a time. That is fucking miserable, and I'm really glad it's not like that, but unfortunately for me, that's the way I played it for a good chunk. And can you really blame me? I mean, when you pick it up, you're not able to attack, you're not able to dash, you're not able to do basically anything. So the last thing I expected was being able to pick up another crystal. That being said, I just don't understand why they felt the need to make it so you can't do jack shit while you're holding the crystals, including one of the most important things, climbing. Yeah, you can't even climb while you're carrying these. That means that if you get to an area where you are supposed to climb, which are present in some of the floors of the game, there's just simply no way to get the crystal up the cliff. You have to abandon it, and it's effectively a paperweight. I just find it so hard to believe that there was nobody during the entire development of this entire thing that thought to themselves, maybe we should make this just a normal-ish item, or make it so that you can actually, interact with stuff and play the game while you're carrying it instead of just not being able to do any of that. Because once you've cleared the entire dungeon of enemies, it's not like there's any sort of challenge. It's just mindlessly and tediously walking around breaking open rocks in order to bring them back to the drill. It feels pointless, and I don't see why it's even here to begin with. Getting to the next floor really should have been relegated to defeating all the enemies. But, as we've already been over, if they had done that, then it would have been even more broken than it currently is. And I'm sure I could probably go on, but at this point, I just don't really even see the point. As a lot of people have told me in my DMs, even if all of this stuff was fixed, the origin as a whole would be mostly pointless. The role that it and the dungeon serves seems very, very bare bones, if not completely non-existent. If you were looking to simply level up very quickly, then you would go to the Trial of One, hit up the Shrine of Order, and then go straight to farming a boss. That's going to be a hell of a lot faster than trying to go through the tedious process of going through levels of this dungeon. When I initially heard about this, I thought that maybe it would finally be an introduction of one of the things that I've seen requested a lot in the game, which is a less risky area where you could practice against some of the harder mobs in the game that you don't really see as often. But unfortunately, if the table on the wiki is to go by, there really aren't any of those mobs that you're going to be running up against that you'd need to practice against present here. This would have been a huge opportunity for them to make an area where you can practice against Nautilodonts, or you can practice against Bone Keepers or Bounders. For God's sakes, maybe even the Kiersguard, I don't know. These are enemies that are present in much more difficult areas of the game, and it would give this area a purpose. Would it be lore accurate? No, probably not, but at the end of the day, surely you can come up with some sort of excuse, and it would fill that void that I've seen so many people asking for. It would give it some sort of purpose, but as it stands right now, well, it just sort of doesn't have any. I really, really, really hope this stuff is improved, and most importantly, I really hope that in the future it doesn't take videos like this in order to get things to be improved. Deepwoken devs, guys, listen to your community. I know that they can be extremely toxic. Trust me, I've dealt with my fair share of idiots. But at the end of the day, there were enough decent people coming to me and telling me, hey, this is really messed up, that even I knew about it. Anyways, I'm just, this was hard to make. I'm really disappointed. I'm done. Have a good one, guys.